Hi guys, so some time ago there was a bit of a rift between the Scottish Tories and their bosses in Westminster. You see, the Conservatives north of the border were losing out to the SNP and to a lesser extent to the Labour Party. The Tories in England with Boris Johnson at the helm were driving voters away and into the arms of the SNP and other parties. Johnson's pandemic response compared to that of Sturgeon's, Johnson breaking the rules and lying about it, made it difficult for the likes of Douglas Ross to defend. And then, of course, we have Brexit, which is harming Scotland while at the same time being trumpeted by the Tories in Westminster. Scottish Conservatives struggled to respond to the problems of Brexit. They had to admit that it was harming Scottish farmers and fishermen, but they couldn't openly criticise it as it was mainly a Tory-driven policy. But recently, Douglas Ross, the leader of the Scottish Tories, managed to heal the rift somewhat with Johnson, as the former knows that the Prime Minister is not going anywhere. Johnson was then invited to speak at the Scottish Conservative Party Spring Conference, where of course he attacked independence.
And I'll tell you the other reason why Douglas has been so successful. He's the only political leader in Scotland saying loud and clear what should be blindingly obvious to everyone, that this is not the moment to be having another referendum. This is not the time. This is not the time for yet more delectable disputations about the Constitution when our European continent is being ravaged by the most vicious war since 1945 and when public services and the economy need to recover from the pandemic. And how incredible that Labour should be so spiritually cowed that they have become nothing but the lapdogs and the enablers of the SNP.
So you see here both an attack on Labour and the independence movement. Isn't it funny how every time the issue of independence is brought up, not actually by the SNP aren't campaigning for independence at the moment, but every time the idea of independence is brought up, it's not the right time. So, back in 2020, it was, we shouldn't be talking about independence because there's a pandemic. Then last year it was, we shouldn't be talking about independence because we need to recover from the pandemic. And then this year, we shouldn't be talking about independence because there's a war going on. So this is extremely insulting, I would say, to the Scottish people. I'm not talking about people who support independence. It's insulting to the Scottish people because you have a Tory in England telling the people of Scotland, now is not the time to talk about independence. I'm telling you when you can talk about independence, and I'll decide when you can talk about it. Now is not the time. Last year was not the time. The year before was not the time. The year before that was not the time. Actually, I forgot about Brexit 2019. You said, we shouldn't be talking about independence because we have to deal with Brexit. So every year there's an excuse. I don't know what the excuse will be next year. Maybe we can ask Boris Johnson in advance. Boris, what is, in 2023, we shouldn't talk about independence because why? Maybe you can predict what the problem will be. It's insulting to the Scottish people. And once again, the idea is not you're supporting independence. This is about a referendum. You should be supporting a referendum. If you believe that the union is strong, then you should support a referendum and say, yes, let's have a referendum, bring it on, and we'll demonstrate how the union is strong, how a majority of people in Scotland would vote to remain in the UK. Because a referendum does not automatically mean independence. There has to be a campaign. And the idea that, we shouldn't be doing that because there's a war going on is just frankly insulting to the general public, to constituents. They don't have a voice. We're not going to give you a voice. A majority of voters in Scotland at the last election voted for parties that want a referendum. So why is Boris Johnson standing in their way? Let me know in the comment section, guys, what you think about all of this. As always, your comments are greatly appreciated. Thanks a lot.